All right, so just as the title says, I want to talk to you about how Bitcoin has essentially changed my life. Not just from a financial standpoint, but more so from the fact on how I make decisions in my spending and my overall outlook on life in itself. Just a little quick background, I have been investing in Bitcoin since 2021, and I've been, I guess, down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin since 2019, 2020, but it wasn't really until 2021 where I put my money where my mouth is. Just to give you guys some insight. So, I mean, I've got coins or sats that are, you know, pretty much even from my first buy. And I've got ones that are 4x, I've got ones that are down 50%. Yeah, I've been buying throughout my entire journey from 2021 all the way up until now, which is March 2026. So 5 years involved in the asset. But I want to talk to you about four key points that have changed my life in the way I look at things. And number one, Bitcoin actually made me start to think long term. And it made me start to think long term in financially, number one, but throughout my entrepreneurial journey, life, health, and fitness at the same time. And it made me think long term really when I went through my first bear market, because I bought in roughly at the top of 2021, which was about 58,000 US dollars. And then we bottomed out to about 17. And during that period of time, it made me question, like, okay, although I back this asset and I've done thousands and thousands of hours of research on it, you still get that feeling like, holy fuck, somewhat of a doubt. Especially when you got all the naysayers saying it's bullshit. Now, what you do in that moment really decides on the level of conviction that you have. And I doubled down on my position, and I think I bought in at about 17K. So essentially the bottom, timed it perfectly. I think it was around November, December 2022. And at that point where I made the decision that this is going to be a long-term hold. In fact, this is going to be a forever hold. I'm never going to sell the asset, ever. And I know I say never, but I'm never going to sell Bitcoin. That's how much conviction I have on it. But the long-term mindset was really there, because if I was to buy at 58, 68K and then double down at 17, well, then my perspective had to be long-term. And that carried on to everything. The way I made decisions with my dating, the way I made decisions with business, the way I made decisions with the choices I would put in my body through food, the way I would make decisions on the way I trained. Everything came into a long-term mindset. And that's helped me in so many ways. I've now got a loving girlfriend, whereas back then I was chasing short-term satisfaction through, dating girls and this and that, and I was always looking for, quick ways to make money. And now I'm just like, you know what, this is the grind, this is the process, and Bitcoin has taught me that. So that was a big thing that I didn't quite realize when I was getting into Bitcoin, because initially I thought, well, we're just going to buy it and make money. And, rightfully so, that's what you want to be thinking when you're making any financial investment. But I had no idea what was on the other end of the learning that I was capable of, or what Bitcoin was capable of giving me. So point number two, it made me question the system. Now, I did mention that I started studying Bitcoin back in 2020, and that was in the depths of COVID. And if anyone remembers, that was a moment in history when a lot of people started questioning the system, just by the nature of how bullshit it was. Like, it's just crazy to think that we shut down the world based on the common cold. And I'm not going to get into all that now, but I'll save that for another time. But it made people start to question, what's going on? Is this real? Is this bullshit? The amount of money that was printed during that time to keep the dollar afloat, to keep people from, you know, not folding on their mortgages and all the handouts that were given out. And then, all of a sudden, all the money, all the prices start to rise. And that's when I started to really think and question the system. And at that time as well, I started making transitions into, well, the way I live my life. I started making transitions in the business that I was operating. I started to become a little bit more sovereign. Obviously, buying Bitcoin was step number one. But I started to think, how am I going to take my financial position into my own hands? Not talking about Bitcoin here, because at that time I was actually in another business. I was involved in electrical work where I was installing solar panels here in Melbourne, Australia. And that was very dependent on the government because there were government handouts. And when there's government handouts, there's money involved. And when the government's money dries up, then so does your business. So that happened to me. And being against the whole pandemic as well didn't work in my favor. But again, it was a stepping stone to pushing me to think, how am I going to create and become a sovereign individual outside of the system whilst also still working within the system? Because at the end of the day, if you want to get outside the system, you've really got to go live in the bush. And I wasn't willing to do that. I still wanted to stay within Metro Melbourne, but, not be reliant on anyone. And that pushed me to working on my personal brand and building my online business. So if push comes to shove, I can essentially leave the country. I don't need a bricks and mortar business in order for me to stay afloat. Now, although I do have one and I do in-person coaching, I also have another avenue which I've created, and that's what I've stemmed through my personal brand, which I also coach people online as well. So during the pandemic, had I had a gym, I'd be fucked. Would not allow people in there. But I think, you know what? If this bullshit comes again, which it probably will happen, what's my way out? Well, if I've got a personal brand, if I can coach people, if I've got an audience on the internet, then I'm essentially exempt from whatever crackdown, lockdown shit that they enforce on us. So that was a big learning curve from Bitcoin itself. It also changed my relationship with spending. And this is a massive one, massive. Now, although I like the finer things in life, because I know how valuable Bitcoin is as an asset, I think it's the best asset in the world. I start to question my spending. Every dollar that I put towards something, I think to myself, is it worth me putting into that, or should I put that in Bitcoin? And the big thing so let me tell you, back when I bought my home, so I used to be, once upon a time, prior to me being a Bitcoiner, I was heavily into property portfolio, buy property, do this. And I had 2 properties back in 2020. I'm down to 1 now. But I had 2 properties at one stage and I was looking to multiply them. And when I first bought my home, which was in March 2020, this is where it really cooked me, especially now when I do the math now, even at Bitcoin's prices now. So let me break it down to you. So March 2020, me and my brother put a deposit down on a home. The home value was 900,000 Australian dollars. Bitcoin price at the time was 10,000 Australian dollars. I think it was about 6,000 US. 10,000 AUD. And I put a 10% deposit down. Had I not put a 10% deposit down, I would have had 9 Bitcoin. In March 2020. We would have 9 Bitcoin. And today's value of 9 Bitcoin, what's Bitcoin now? 70,000, say it's 100,000 Australian dollars, just for mathematical sake. I'd have 900,000 AUD with no debt. My property is currently worth 6 years later. I reckon if I put that on the market, I'd sell it for 1.2 million AUD. 1.2 million AUD. My property back then, at 900,000, was worth 90 Bitcoin. 90 Bitcoin. 6 years later, my property today, at $100,000 Bitcoin and a $1.2 million home, is worth 12 Bitcoin. 12. It's gone from 90 Bitcoin to 12 Bitcoin in fucking 6 years. 6 years. Oh, fuck my life. Now, granted, I wasn't down the Bitcoin rabbit hole at the time. And not to say the purchase of my property wasn't a good investment. Don't get me wrong. I bought a great property. I got good use out of it. I lived in it for, honestly, up until about 4 months ago. It's tenanted out right now, and it doesn't cost me anything to hold. So it hasn't been a bad investment, but it wasn't the best investment I could have made. Now, I'm not sitting here kicking myself. Somewhat am, but everything's a learning lesson, right? It has to be a learning lesson. I'm never going to make that mistake again, ever. There's no way. Like, in 6 years, it's gone from 90 Bitcoin down to, what did I say, 12 Bitcoin? What do you think is going to happen in another 6 years? It's going to go down to like 3, 4 Bitcoin. Sure, the property's rising in value, but not at the rate of what Bitcoin is. Now, yes, sure, you get leverage when you buy property, and, you know, I put 90 grand down and now I've got 900 grand working for me and blah, 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 blah. I get all that, trust me. I've done property courses, I was investing in property. I understand the mechanics of leverage, don't get me wrong. And that's why property can be good. I'm not saying it's not good. You can still make cash on property. I know plenty of people that make cash. I've made cash on property. But the simplicity behind Bitcoin and what it's taught me is that I ain't making that fucking mistake again. Simple as that. I had a BMW. I had a classic BMW. It was a 1983 323 BMW. Loved it. This car was an emotional purchase that I made many years ago. It was a car in which my father had growing up, and, you know, I wanted to essentially emulate my dad, and I actually got rid of it a couple of months ago because it was sitting in my garage, deregistered, never had any use to it over the last 3 years. And I thought to myself, this thing's worth, I sold it for 15 grand. Now, arguably I could have sold it for more, but honestly, I just wanted to get rid of the fucking thing because I had no use. I'm sitting there, I'm looking at it, I'm like, mate, I've got this car here. I'm not getting any use out of it. It's already been sitting in the garage for 2 years with no use case. How much longer am I going to hold on to this thing and be emotionally attached to a vehicle that's not growing in value? And then one day I'm going to look at myself and go, bro, if you sold it back then and put it into BTC, look what the value would be at right now. And I didn't not want to go through the exact same process I did with my house, with my car. So, flogged it off. Done. Put it all into Bitcoin. And I think I bought Bitcoin at like 90 grand. So it's It's actually down right now, but I don't give a fuck because I don't need the cash. I don't need the Bitcoin. For me, it's a long-term play. It's a forever play. And with my mindset knowing Bitcoin's going to go into the hundreds of millions, whether I buy it at 50, 40, 120, 130, 200K, 1 million, doesn't matter to me. It's the long-term play. And one more point. I mean, there's probably a fuck ton more points, but these are the 4 points that I've written down. It has, I guess, reinforced responsibility within my own self and my own finances, which kind of ties back into being self-sovereign, but more so responsibility for my own wealth. Because going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and a great book that I would recommend to you reading is Thank God for Bitcoin. Because this book teaches you everything about money before Bitcoin only comes into the play at I think the last 2 chapters. Because when you understand Bitcoin, you start to understand what money is. And when you understand what money is, whether you actually buy Bitcoin or not, you're going to operate from a lens that's far better and it's going to serve you far better on planet Earth. Because most people have got no fucking idea what money is. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a man that wants to do anything in this world, that wants to be able to take care of their family, you need to have solid understanding on how finances work. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. Money in, money out. How can you leverage? How can you do this? And then all the nooks and crannies you can use to make your life so much easier. But basic principles that you need to understand is how to understand money or learning money. And understanding Bitcoin for me taught me a shit ton about money. I was always interested in numbers. I was pretty good at maths in high school, and I always had a very, very good understanding of how numbers worked. So it was very easy for me to pick up. And then once I got into business, then I had to just expand my knowledge even more because I didn't want to get out of business, and part of being good at business is understanding, the mechanics of the cash flow, your monthly ins, your monthly outs, all that sort of stuff. And Bitcoin assisted me a shit ton in that. A shit ton. And I would honestly, like I mentioned just before, whether you actually, I just encourage everyone to study Bitcoin. Study Bitcoin, and whether you actually invest in Bitcoin or not, I couldn't give a fuck. But you will definitely come out better whether you buy Bitcoin or not. But I can also guarantee you that if you study Bitcoin, there is no way that you would not invest in it. I'm not saying you're going to be full-blown orange pilled to a point where your entire fucking net worth is in it. But anyone with, I would say, a quarter of a brain that studied Bitcoin would start investing in it. That's how gung-ho and dead set I am about it. And yeah, I mean, from a financial point, it's assisted me greatly. Now, I'm not extremely up by any means. Like I said, my first buy was around the same price of what it is now. I'm not even too sure what my average buy is. But understanding Bitcoin, the decentralized finance, the decentralization of money, my ability to extract liquidity out of it as well, which I'm going to create another video on that as well, because at the moment I do have a Bitcoin loan that I've taken out. I'm not going to dive too deep into it now, but I did go through many years of my life in where I was buying Bitcoin for so long, and I was, I guess, so wealthy in Bitcoin terms, but I didn't really feel it in life. And I was like, what is the point of this? I want to be able to use it. So I took a loan against my Bitcoin, extracted liquidity, tax-free as well, obviously, because it's a loan. Again, understanding finance will give you an understanding of this. So I've now made money extrapolating liquidity out of my Bitcoin holdings. And I've taken that money and I've invested that into my business and into myself as my business, which has now allowed me to compound and make more money, essentially allowing me as well to now buy more Bitcoin in the process. And the cycle just flows and flows and flows and flows and flows and flows. And if you understand the wealthy and what they do, typically with properties, because they have the large proportion of wealth is tied up in properties with the property investors and things like that, that's what they do. That's what I was thinking of doing with my properties. Take property, leverage against it, buy another asset, wait till the market rises, refinance, access to the equity, purchase more, and now you've got multiple properties going up at 5-6%, and then you're making 300-400K, 50 grand here, 50 grand here, 50 grand here, 50 grand here, so on and so forth. And I thought to myself, why the fuck aren't I doing that with my Bitcoin? If I was going to have that mindset with property, why not do it with Bitcoin? Why would I sell my Bitcoin if I know it's the greatest asset on earth? That'd be stupid. It goes against my thinking. But at the time, it's like my programmed brain from this matrix that we're living in was trying to suck me back in. And I had to fight it and fight it and fight it. And that was a huge moment when I got access to that liquidity and it hit my bank account. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? It was that easy. I can do this from anywhere in the world. No one asked me for financial papers, nothing. All I had to show was a collateral of my Bitcoin. And just like that, they're going to hand me money tax-free. It was like a cheat code to life. And now I have the ability to make more money on top of the money they give me for free. And if I'm smart enough with my loan, I don't have to pay it back. Mind blown. Mind blown. Anyway, that's it. That's all I want to talk about today. How much have I rambled on for 23 minutes? That's my take on Bitcoin. If you want to follow me on my socials, check me out on Instagram, Chris Damasis Fit, Facebook, Chris Damasis or Christos Damasis. I can't remember which one it is, but if you search my name anywhere, I'm sure I'll pop up. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.